Hi, Jianhua. I'm glad to have you on my channel. So, hi, it's been a while. We met 2 years ago. You interviewed me in Hong Kong. It was about the Hong Kong riots, and so you are working for CGTN, and we are here on this show to talk about Xinjiang and the geopolitics behind this. Maybe debunk a little bit. So, why don't you give us your background and how did you came to how did you come to be a journalist and your experience in Xinjiang, if you can share your knowledge and what you saw in Xinjiang.
Hi, Angelo. Great to be here. It's my pleasure to be on your show today. So, as you said, I'm a journalist at CGTN. I've been working there for about 5 years, 5 to 6 years already. And as for Xinjiang, I stayed in Xinjiang for about 2 months' time in 2020, and I covered a great majority of the southern part of Xinjiang where Uyghurs live, and also some parts in the north of that region, where most of them are Kazakhs and also Mongols. So I think when it comes to Xinjiang, it has been a hot topic all around the world, in China and beyond, of course. And it's my great pleasure to be here today, and we can talk about that.
Great. So there are many claims about Xinjiang. Why don't we start with the claim 1 million people in what they call concentration camps? What is it? They're not concentration camps. It's more like educational camps. Can you give us maybe the background of those camps and why Chinese government started creating those re-education schools? And is it anything special in China? I mean, those schools. I think a lot of people in the West are not familiar with those functional schools where people actually go there to learn a job. Can you give us?
Yeah, Angelo. I think there were 2 points that you mentioned. One is it's a concentration camp. I don't think that is wrong. I don't think that is right, and that is a misnomer. When it comes to concentration camp, that is usually what the Germans did to mostly Jewish people and other ethnic minorities during the Second World War. And of course, with the that was definitely an atrocity and tragic. And then, so now if you call it concentration camp, I definitely think that is what do we call it? Why do we call it concentration camp? That is definitely misnomer. And also when it comes to the figure 1 million, how come you have the number 1 million? Did you do enough research? I mean, the experts you pointed out, or they got the leaked document to them. 1 million, that is a huge number. And I really want to talk to them. You really need to get to the point. How come it is 1 million? And the Chinese government, of course, never said that there are around 1 million people in the re-education camp, as they call it, or they call it the education center. And we need to know, Angelo, I've been to Xinjiang for quite a few times, actually. Last year, I stayed there for over half year. And also in 2016, 5 years ago, I stayed there for about 2 weeks' time, half a month. And then, so this is the problem. If you go to Xinjiang, and especially among the Uyghur people, especially the older generation, they don't speak good Mandarin, Chinese. If they want to find good jobs, if they want to integrate further with the mainstream society, they need to have enough language skills and also about education. And we know when it comes to Xinjiang, it is in the northwest of China. And also the economy compared with some other parts of China, especially the eastern part of this country, the economy is bad. So if they want to boost the economy, we know, Angelo, the first thing is education. Then you need to have the skills, and you need to be equipped with the skills that you need so that you can work, and then so that you can put food on the table. And then, so if you don't obtain or acquire any of those skills that you definitely need in China, like now today, of course, you can't get any jobs. And then if you don't get any jobs, how can you send your kids to school, to college? And that could be a problem. That could be a vicious cycle, as we call it. So what the Chinese government is doing now is trying to get those people prepared for society if they want to work now. And also, as the Chinese government called it, that is extremely thought. And I talked to the local officials actually in Xinjiang during my trip there. They told me some of the, you know the religion in Xinjiang?
Yes.
Now it's Islam. And then, so some of the, as we call it, the priests, but not priests, but
Imams, yeah.
Imams, some of them, they would go to Afghanistan. And then, so after that, they come back to Xinjiang, and then they would have these congregations, like the undercover congregations under the table, and then they would spread the ideas of extremism. And then that is also part of the reason, one of the major reasons why the Chinese government is doing this. And what they did, or they have been doing, is trying to make sure that the locals in Xinjiang, especially Uyghurs now, or Muslims in general, do not be affected by the dangerous ideas that some of the imams have brought into Xinjiang from other countries, especially extremism. And let me give you one example. I think that is from one of the imams who got the extremist ideas from other countries outside China. When they come back, they tell, so they tell the, what do you call it? The locals, or those who go to the congregation, that if you die, that is very much like if you die as a martyr, and in heaven you can get whatever you want. You can get unlimited wealth and also unlimited virgins. I mean, that is absolutely ridiculous, radical ideas, and that's what the government has been doing, trying to make sure that Xinjiang would be stable. If the government doesn't do that, it could be quite dangerous. Let's say most of the Uyghurs, also the Muslims, they live in the southern part of Xinjiang. It spreads the idea to the northern part of that region, let's say among the Kazakhs and also among the Mongols. And of course, it could be a very dangerous idea when it comes to Xinjiang. It is about 1/6 of China's territory. I mean, that is quite dangerous.
No, absolutely. I think it's within the trend of radicalization, the spread of Wahhabism. And I think it's important for people to understand that China has a very small border with Afghanistan, and it was very dangerous for China. There was this, I mean, a lot of radicals, they were going back and forth from Afghanistan to China. So it's related to the spread of Wahhabism. And there's the ETIM, which is this terrorist group, which is related to separatism of Xinjiang, which is backed by the US, which actually fought in Syria. And I think probably China was very cautious about this. It didn't want to replicate what happened especially what happened in Syria. So this whole movement, regime change, which was related to regime change, replicating what they did to Syria, imported into China.
Yeah, especially IS and ISIS back then, a couple of years ago, it was absolutely mental around the world. And that is when the Chinese government started to ramp up efforts to get rid of extremism in Xinjiang.
Yes, and also what you just said before about those schools, it's about basic human rights. It's actually about bringing education. So how you do poverty alleviation is bring education. And most important, you probably know the saying is that in China, they say, if you want to become rich, start building a road. And that's right. And so basically what happened, the problem of Xinjiang and those areas, especially the southern part, when you get closer to Kashgar, it's very isolated. There was not much like infrastructure, and it's a critical point in the Belt and Road Initiative. So basically it wanted just to work on poverty alleviation. How do you do that? It's through schools. And those schools, actually, I just want to add up a few things. I mentioned just before the 1 million claim. The 1 million claim is related to the narrative of a person called Adrian Zenz, which is a far right person, is an extremist, you know, when it comes to Christian religion. He's also anti-Semite, you know, he wrote it in a book. So he has a very strange view of the world. And he's backed by the US State Department. So he's financed by the US. So his 1 million claim comes from the interview of 8 people, and probably 8 people that are for the sedition of Xinjiang, for separatism. So you interview 8 people and you come to extrapolation of 1 million people into those re-education camps. So it's just absurd. And the interesting thing is that, you know, it's the loop of saying, well, where did you get this information? He says, oh, I got it from this media. And the media says, you ask the media, where did you get this information? And it's this color, and this color says it's this person. So it's the lies going on a loop. And sometimes, you know, some people, they even say 2 million, 3 million, and it's probably much lower than that, you know.
That, I mean, the number, when it comes to 1 million, as you said, Adrian Zan's only interviewed about 7 to 8 people, and then you can jump on the conclusion that around 1 million Uyghurs are thrown into or incarcerated into the so-called concentration camp. That is absolutely ridiculous. And also did the background research on Adrian Zan's, and he's a senior fellow in China Studies at the Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation. I think that's the foundation you mentioned that is backed by the United States. I mean, that is absolutely, stereotypical. The foundation is called Victims of Communism because anything that's related to communism is wrong. In the first place, if you have that as a premise, then there is no more. I mean, it's pointless to continue the discussion about how Xinjiang is doing right now. I mean, with Adrian Zan's. I really wish that I could interview him.
Well, I think it's very easy to debunk. The only problem is that they have their hands on the narrative and the media. That's the problem. They will never interview people like you and I just because we are on the ground, and we could easily debunk. So
that's the thing, Angelo. I mean, when it comes to Xinjiang, the thing is, so how come there were so many people, scholars, including scholars and journalists, they usually jump at conclusions most of the time because they usually get the so-called leaked documents to them, and then they will make some assumptions. And also some people will work from afar. They don't come to Xinjiang, or they don't live in China, and they don't talk to the local people to do their research. I mean, a well-rounded research and is solid. But the thing is, we don't have any solid research on Xinjiang now. We only have assumptions and also some tentative conclusions at this point. That is quite dangerous. Of course, there was so much politics involved in the background. That's when we talk about later.
Yeah, I just want to give a little bit of background in the difference in China when it comes to factories. And when it comes to schools and campus, actually people don't know that, but you know, in a regular factory, let's say in Europe, well, you go to home every night. In China, it's very different. You know, you tend to have migrants that actually live the whole week in the factory, and maybe they leave during the weekends. So those educational schools, it's exactly the same. It's the same concept. People come from far places, you know, 1-2 hours away. So what they do is that they stay there during the week, but on weekends they leave. You know, so those educational schools, it's just the norm in China that you learn a job. You know, you learn, you know, it can be mechanical, whatever. So you learn a professional, and you get to go back to home every weekend. And also, you know, they show pictures and videos of barbers and so on. And it's very counterintuitive. It's not for people to, you know, they say, well, it's so that people don't escape. It's not this. It's actually, they don't want people from outside to come in. You know, it's just very counterintuitive. A lot of people from the West, if you haven't lived in China, people might not understand, you know, and in reality, it's also a part of the program of poverty alleviation. Again, you know, if you need to give the tools to people to get an education so they can move the social ladder. You're giving opportunities, because otherwise they are in a small village, isolated, and they are close to ideas, fundamentalist ideas, easily manipulated. If you give education to people, it's much harder to get them radicalized. And,
Yeah,
and
that's
that's what China did. In reality, there was a trip. I mean, many trips, of people from surrounding countries that had the same problems of radicalization, Muslim countries mainly, and they all back China because it's a very innovative way to fight radicalization. How do you fight radicalization? It's not by putting people in Guantanamo. You destroy their life, and actually you make them even worse.
yeah.
And keep in mind that in Guantanamo they're torturing people. Here you give them a path of redemption, and you giving them some foundation just for poverty alleviation. You're giving them a future. It's not about punishment. It's anticipation. Not saying that, maybe there might be a few cases where, unfairness and so on. That happens maybe everywhere. But again, the whole idea is just the opposite of what they are trying to picture. It's about poverty alleviation, bringing education to people, giving them opportunities. So they're making something which is very positive, which is actually very much for human rights. They're picturing this as being something evil. It's an absurdity, I think.
We usually look at others for our own ideas. I mean, with lens or something, it is like how you picture what others would do is usually a reflection of what you would do. So that's the problem. And you talk about urbanization and also some migrants, and also poverty alleviation, de-radicalization. I mean, those things are happening in Xinjiang right now. What the government is trying to do, poverty alleviation is very important, as we said just now. Xinjiang, its economy is a little bit lagging behind, some other regions, or especially the central and eastern part of China. Of course, poverty alleviation is part of it. And then if you want to if you want to make sure that poverty alleviation programs can go smoothly in Xinjiang, one thing you need to do is maintaining is the stability. If there is no stability, if there is radicalism, all of the shop in China, especially, in Xinjiang, that could be a problem. How can you get rid of poverty? Let's look at some other countries, especially in Afghanistan or parts of Pakistan. Radicalism is ongoing right now, especially in Syria. How can you improve people's well-being if you don't get rid of extremist ideas in the first place, right?
Yes, maybe we can go back to because not necessarily people know about the extremism, and actually the terrorist acts, the bombing, the killing, the China suffered because of these radicalism. Can you give us the background? What happened? It didn't, this idea of de-radicalization didn't come for just by chance. There were good reasons to start these de-radicalization programs.
Yeah, of course. I think there were 2 rounds of radicalization in Xinjiang as a whole, and one of the most prominent ones was in Urumqi, the capital city of Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region, a few years ago. And then, so it was really bad. I think over 30 people were killed in the streets randomly by the Uyghurs, and most of the victims were Han people. Just a reminder, probably some people don't know. When it comes to Han people vis-a-vis Uyghur people in Xinjiang, the great majority of people in China, the Han Chinese people, accounting for over 90%. And then, so we also have around 55 ethnic minority groups. And in Xinjiang, it is in northwest of China. And then, so it's a place, it's a region that is full of ethnic minority people. Kazakhs, Tajiks, Uyghurs, and Uyghurs in Xinjiang actually are the majority. And this is the thing, there was this conflict, as I said, a couple of years ago in Urumqi, and then it resulted in the massacre of Han Chinese people. And the Han Chinese people, Urumqi is the capital of Xinjiang, so that's the place usually you have people from different backgrounds, and Uyghurs, Han Chinese people, and Kazakhs, and Tajiks. And so I think there was this conflict, and that was, and the root cause of it was what they called the inequality between Han Chinese people and also Uyghurs when it comes to job opportunities and anything. So there was this conflict and maybe people were killed, and the Chinese government, it was definitely an emergency. Then they sent the security people to get rid of the riots and everything. And also, we talked about job opportunities and inequality when it comes to job opportunities. That is because some Uyghurs, or most of them, they don't think that they have shared the benefits of China's rapid economic development, and they think that the Han Chinese people have raked in the economic benefits. But the thing is it's all about education. If you don't have enough skills to integrate into mainstream society, that could be the problem. And after that, the Chinese government started to roll out the de-radicalization programs in Xinjiang, and for one thing, to get rid of the extremist ideas, and also, on the other hand, to improve the local people's well-being so that they could share the fruit of China's economic development. And that was the start of the de-radicalization movement in China.
Yeah, I'd like just to add up a few things here. I think from my experience in China, minorities are actually the pride of China. China is extremely proud of its diversity and the minorities. And in reality, there is what we call a positive discrimination. In reality, minorities have been always enjoying more rights, more advantages than the Han Chinese. To give you an example, the minority, they never had a one-child policy. Most of Han Chinese could only have one child. It was never applied to the minorities. Just because, so it's a when you have the West calling about a culture, a genocide, it's just an absurdity. When you look at the freedom of religion, there are 24,000 mosques in Xinjiang. I mean, it's just about facts. The problem is that facts, when you really look at facts, it's all there. You cannot deny it. You know, it's and again, it's we need to look at what happened in elsewhere, and what in terms of regime change and destabilization of country. It's a replica of what happened in other countries. Arab Spring, Maidan Revolution. And we need to look at the funding, follow the funding and follow the motives. And I think it's related to very long time ago, 1965 already, there was the Pentagon Papers, which was all about encirclement of China. So if you look at this, there was back then it was about aiming at Vietnam, but the ultimate purpose was related to the encirclement of China. How do you encircle China is through putting, pressure on Tibet, Xinjiang, keeping in mind that actually Tibet, also it was the Dalai Lama was funded by the CIA. There's ample proofs, and he doesn't deny that. And then you had already those movements in the 70s. You had the father of Erkin Altekin, which is the founder of the World Uyghur Congress, which is financed, by the way, by the National Endowment for Democracy, which is nothing else than the CIA. Well, back then in the 1970s, Nixon met with the Altekin. So you see, before even opening up the relationship between China and the US already had started to plant the seeds for those sedition movements, both in Tibet and in Xinjiang. I know you have also an ample experience in Tibet. Could you give us maybe a bit of a background of your experience in Tibet? And is it similar what happened in Tibet, similar to Xinjiang?
In Tibet, I was there for half a year in 2016 as a journalist. So in Tibet and Xinjiang, they're quite different actually. Though Tibet is also a very large region, it is it borders Xinjiang, but it's down there. And in Tibet, and most of them, it's quite, I mean, when it comes to Tibet and to the great majority of them, the population there are Tibetans. It's quite different from Xinjiang with a diverse ethnic background of there. And in Tibet, what I saw when I first landed, actually, Angelo, I was expecting that everyone would just speak Mandarin Chinese. That wouldn't have this language barrier when I got there. But the thing is, when I got there, not many people actually spoke Chinese, Mandarin Chinese, and even in Lhasa, that's the capital city of Tibet, because most of them, they would converse in Tibetan, and they're proud of their culture. They're proud of their Tibetan culture. And also another thing that I was so impressed when I got there was religion. Tibetan Buddhism, I was so impressed and I loved it. I was usually, even though in Lhasa, there were so many temples, big ones and small ones, the biggest one, Chokan Temple, and also some of the small ones that you can find where you're walking around, just around the corner and then going, and then you can pray a little bit with local Tibetans. That is what I love to do. And then you can also, I would like to follow their customs when I was there. And I was, so everyone would have this rosary, you know, the beads, and they also have this little prayer wheel, every one of them. I mean, in the streets, that is everywhere. That is usually seen. And I was going to the shops, and then I would usually make this Tibetan attire. I have some friends in Tibet, in Lhasa, and then they would show me around the guys. They are so hospitable. I mean, I've been to so many different places in Hong Kong. That is where we met. In Xinjiang, I finished over half of China, and I love Tibet the most. And people there are so hospitable, and they are, I think they are so free to follow their own lifestyles. If you want to pray in the temple, you go. And if you want to go have a picnic, they are picnic lovers. So every time when the weather is fine, you'll find tons of them just lying or sitting on the lawn, enjoying the beautiful sunshine and having their traditional yak tea, or we call it the bubble tea. That is very much like the English version of the bubble tea. But it is also the one of the local teas that they have, and they enjoy quality time with their family. And also when it comes to Tibet, I think that is also one of the points that many of the Western countries are attacking China. And it's usually, of course, not surprisingly, related to human rights, about religion, about freedoms of expression, freedom of religion. But if you really go there, you would be absolutely amazed by their Tibetan Buddhism. I mean, absolutely, you're free to do, you're free to pray, you're free to do everything. And there are so many of them, actually, especially the older generation. They don't actually work. I think they have retired already. And before sunrise, they are already there praying to the Potala Palace, or at the or in the square, or in front of the square of the Chokan Temple. There was tons of them. I was so amazed by that.
Well, same here. I was in Tibet. I've been there like many times, but the first time was in 1995. So I've seen the changes, you know, like amazing changes. Again, when you look at preservation of local culture, you can only, the only difference is that, you know, you have a certain, more like there's a heavy population of Han Chinese, but only concentrated in the cities. So you have three major cities, which is Lhasa, Shigatse, and Regatse. Then you have Tingri as well, you know, towards there. Those are the places that kind of the main cities, you know, and you see presence of Han Chinese, but otherwise you get out of those cities, it's all Tibetans, and extremely typical, very, very typical Tibetans. I just want to add, just for the background, you know, because most people, they don't know about Tibet and Tibet history. Average Westerners, they watch 7 Years in Tibet, Brad Pitt, and they think that Tibet was this paradise. Before the communists, there was a period where, you know, like China was in civil war, and then you have the communists that took over, and back then, under the Dalai Lama, there was still slavery. There are lots of things that we need to tell people, that actually most of the country was the most backward country in the world in terms of human rights. So women had absolutely no rights. It was a theocracy which was ruled by a very tough regime. I mean, we can call it's a regime. And then, you know, and there was slavery. People were slaved, and you had like a very tiny minority that was actually ruling over the people. Then you had people had no access to education. Only monks could read, you know, and so probably 90 to 95% of people could not read. And the life expectancy was half of what it is now. So people had only 35 to 40 years old of life expectancy. So it's very important just to tell those points, very factual points. We brought them with China, the Communist Party managed to double up the life expectancy of Tibetans, and those are the most important human rights. So it's important to look at the achievements. And since I've been 25 years ago in Tibet, and I've been in Tibet also recently, I've seen the changes, and people are extremely grateful, you know. So those things are important to mention. I just want to mention,
I think you're right. It was definitely slavery actually before communism went into Tibet. And then, you know, the local government, they call it Gaxia government in Tibet, it was absolutely, and Tibet as a whole was actually divided or controlled by some royal society, and also some large families basically controlled Tibet. There was slavery, and let me give you one example. If you're a slave and you can be flagged to death, or you can be skinned, or your eyes can be gouged by the you know, by the landlord. So it was absolutely what do you call it? It was horrendous. I mean, if you want to talk about human rights, and then you need to absolutely make comparisons between the before and the after.
You know, it's funny. I went into details. You know, I even read the autobiography of the Dalai Lama, and it's funny because it's in his book. He's saying, well, the situation when it came to human rights, the situation was not good, but I was about to change it. You know, I think this is the reaction of someone that has lost the power. But when they were in power, they wouldn't change anything, because, you know, you stick to your power. You know, it's just when because he has lost his power, and then because he has a new master. The Dalai Lama, again, is funded by the CIA. He has a different agenda, and I think he should face the reality of the theocracy that Tibet was suffering under his reign. And I think it's a pity. I think it makes look like Saudi Arabia. You know how we can criticize Saudi Arabia when it comes to human rights. It makes look like Disneyland compared to what Tibet was under the Dalai Lama. So I think the problem is that people don't have this education, and sadly, when I was in Tibet, I got hold of books which were written by foreigners, Westerners, you know, expert in Tibetology, and sadly, those books that are telling the truth are never released in the West, because there's an agenda which is anti-China agenda, and sadly, it's not available.
When it comes to anti-China agenda, and then so the weak links we're looking at are Tibet and Xinjiang. I mean, in the western part of China, because those are the far-flung regions compared to central and eastern and northern parts of China or the south. So they would usually attack the weak links of a country first, so that you can spread your idea to the other parts of this country. And then China is growing absolutely. I mean, when it comes to its economy and politics, and its political and economic influence is expanding all around the world. And they are, I mean, especially the US, that is what they are doing right now. They need to make sure that China wouldn't grow as fast or continues to grow as fast as it does now. So that is what they have been doing, and not only Tibet and Xinjiang, but also Hong Kong. That is also one of the weak links, and that is where we met, of course. And people, some of them are founded by the US government so that they can infiltrate into the Chinese society.
Yeah, just to, I think it's important to note that what the strategy of regime change is actually try to tap also into sometimes legitimate claims and just to appropriate themselves that and to manipulate it completely. I give you an example. In Hong Kong, some locals had legitimate claims, but the claims were more like related to social issues, especially when it came to housing. So what they did is that they tried to penetrate those organizations, you know, and then they appropriate those claims. They say, well, and then they shift, and then it became from a social issue, it became an anti-China. And then you had those, and from there you had people having like American flags and British flags, and this is when they realized, well, we've been completely manipulated. And the same in Xinjiang, there were problems. You just mentioned before, it was poverty and inequalities, just because it's such a remote place. You know, it's so far from Beijing, so there was like first the prosperity of the coastal areas, and it was really hard to spread this wealth throughout China. Well, just because of connections, you know, roads. This is why actually, this is what the Belt and Road Initiative is bringing. Once you connect China East and West, and then from there you connect to bordering countries, then you are going to create wealth for China and for the rest of Eurasia, I think. Maybe we can maybe jump to Belt and Road Initiative. I mean, can you tell us about this great project?
Yeah, first we need to make sure that our audience would understand the Belt and Road Initiative, or earlier we call it One Belt, One Road Initiative. It was proposed by Chinese leader Xi Jinping in 2013. So the end game for this project, for this initiative, was connecting Asia, Europe, Africa, through infrastructure. So as you said just now, that is a famous Chinese saying, if you want to be rich, and then you need to build the roads first. And that is what China has been doing all through the past decades, actually, especially after its reform and opening up at the end of the 1970s. And then China's economy is growing fast. And also, I mean, when it comes to the Belt and Road Initiative, it is actually a revival of what we call it. It's like a revival or rejuvenation of the Chinese nation. That's what the Chinese leaders have been talking about, especially during Xi Jinping's presidency. So what they have been doing is replacing China to its legitimate place. I mean, its past glory. So when it comes to rejuvenation of the Chinese nation, I mean, how glorious that would be. I mean, that is still subjected to different interpretations, because in the past, in the Tang dynasty and all the Song dynasty, I mean, all of those past histories of China actually were really glorious. And probably what China is doing right now is trying to make a lead in many different or various and multiple international issues and affairs. And through the Belt and Road Initiative, so we're looking at two of them. One is the Belt, apparently, and the other one is connecting China, especially the southern part of China, through some sea routes. And so we're looking at two of them. If some of viewers are interested, I think they can Google it, they can Google it, Belt and Road Initiative. One is the economic belt. That's the belts we're talking about. The other one is the maritime route through the southern part of it. I mean, the port in Guangzhou and also in Fujian province in southeastern part of China. So if we talk about the belt, actually, I mean, both of them are equally important. But the thing is, when it comes to the belt, that is the economic belt, I mean, on land, I think that is more influential somehow. So it used to start from Xi'an, I mean, the previous capital in the Tang dynasty over 1,000, 2,000 years ago. So they started the Silk Road. It was connected to Central Asia and also to Europe and I mean, all sorts of countries along the road. So China is doing that now. As we were talking about Xinjiang, I mean, Xinjiang plays a key role in China's Belt and Road Initiative. And the China's Belt and Road Initiative, it didn't come out of the blue, like all of a sudden. It started actually, or I would call it a continuation of China's going out policy. It started around the beginning of the 2000s. So China wanted to go out to make sure that it can sell its products. I mean, more involved in the international politics, economy, and social issues and affairs and anything. So after that, they realized, and also there is another policy that is the development of the Western region of China, because Chinese government realized, the central government realized that there is this unequal development between China's East and also China's West. That is one example in the West, of course, that's Xinjiang and Tibet, and also some regions in the Northwest, and the Eastern regions are like Shanghai, as everyone knows, and also Zhejiang, and that's the place where China exports a lot of commodities to other countries. So they started to develop the Western regions, and many people actually started to migrate to Xinjiang to develop this region, to develop its economy. And through the Belt and Road Initiative, and Xinjiang plays a key role because it connects Central Asia and other parts of China. So the government needs to make sure that Xinjiang's economy would grow more rapidly or in a healthy fashion through the Belt and Road Initiative. So that is why Xinjiang is playing an ever increasingly important role. And that is also the reason why some Western governments now are attacking China through Xinjiang, because it can break the link. You can break the link by breaking Xinjiang.
Yes, I'd like to add that Xinjiang is also very rich in oil and gas. There was some massive discoveries there. And it's very interesting. I came across a video of Erkin Altekin. He's the founder of the World Uyghur Congress. And in the video, he actually says that he defines the oil and gas of Xinjiang as is oil. So he tells the Americans, why don't you come to Xinjiang? You can take my oil. You help me making Xinjiang independent and you will be able to take my oil. So it's what we call the traitors and useful idiots. Just remember that, well, he's been working for the CIA for more than 20 years. He was actually one of the main actors that helped the dissolution of the USSR. So he was working for Voice of America, and he was actually broadcasting to Turkmenistan, Tajikistan, all those ex-USSR countries. He was broadcasting for secessions with the USSR. So it's important to give the background. So this is the type of person that is actually fighting for Xinjiang, independence movement. I'd like to mention just one more thing about the Belt and Road Initiative. Just my opinion on this. I think also one of the reasons of the Belt and Road Initiative is to try to bypass as much as possible the Malacca Straits. Keeping in mind there's a huge traffic in the Malacca Strait, and if the easiest way to attack China from the US perspective would be to do a blockade on the Malacca Strait, and that would be devastating for China. And so what they're doing, one way is, there are many ways, but the main way would just to have an alternative to be inland. And then another way would be just, there's a project in Thailand, which is called the Crack Canal, which would completely bypass, would cut Thailand. You know, you'd have they would save like 1,600 miles of journey. So it would be very ecological too. And it would actually completely bypass that Crack Canal. But then what is happening is that there's a huge propaganda and there's a huge pressure on all those countries that are signing into the Belt and Road initiatives, because the US doesn't want that. So I think it's the Malacca Strait, bypassing Malacca Strait is one of them. The other thing is the US doesn't want that there's this shift of gravity towards Eurasia.
Yeah.
And it's undermining US hegemony. And I think it's also a very good way just for China to export its overcapacity, so trading purpose. And also a very important point, I think this is not, we don't talk much about this, but China, because of its trade surplus, has a currency surplus. So China has a huge amount of US dollars. And the value of US dollars it has only value if you spend it. And if you so you can either buy more goods, American goods, and you actually keep on fueling this Ponzi scheme in the US, or you can invest it to tangible assets. So it's with one stone, it's killing many birds, because China is investing to infrastructure. And so it's a very smart way, and it's actually undermining also the US dollar hegemony, because many of those investments are being done not in US dollars. So China is actually committing in the case of Iran, it's a deal that is $400 billion US, which is extreme. It's massive in a period of 25 years. So this single deals will not be done. They won't use US dollar. So it's actually attacking the US dollar hegemony. And the same between Russia and China. Now all the trade between Russia and China is not being done in US dollar. So this whole thing about the US dollar, I think the last element that for the downfall of the US economy is going to be countries that will not use the US dollar.
Yeah, I think so. You're right. That is about the US dollar hegemony that started actually from the Bretton Woods. And also it's because, and so what China is doing actually is promoting its own currency, the RMB. And you know that the RMB joined the special drawing basket a couple of years ago. And then so China is trying to make sure that RMB would be the currency that we do business with. And that would definitely be helpful, I mean, to break the hegemony of the US dollars. And also talk about the overcapacity, or this overcapacity. China is trying to export its overcapacity to other countries through the Belt and Road Initiative. And then on the other hand, we need to look at some, the other side of this coin. So let's say if I'm from a poor country and also I'm a participant of the Belt and Road Initiative, and I really need your cement, I really need your steel to build my roads, my infrastructure and everything, I think that could be absolutely a good idea for me. And then, so another thing I would like to add is China has been offering some concessional loans, and also what China is doing that is quite different from what the US and also some other Western countries is no strings attached policy. I don't want to change your ideology. You can do it your way, and then you can have my concessional loans. And what I want is you improve your infrastructure, you improve the well-being of your locals and your residents, your subjects, whatever. And as long as you get rich, and then we could be on an equal footing so that we can do business. I mean, when it comes to China, that is quite interesting. China somehow is very good at doing business somehow. I mean, making commodities, and we get the idea. I mean, China is like the world's manufacturer because it experienced a recent poverty after the Civil War, after the Second World War, and it was invaded by Japan. So it was put at a very disadvantaged position. And then, so China after the founding of the People's Republic of China in 1949, and then so it got some of the jobs outsourced by the United States or the first world countries. And then, okay, I'm poor, and then my wage is lower, and then so I have cheap labor here, and then let's just work. So I don't want to fight for more rights or anything. And I work for you, I assemble everything, iPhones, even now in China. And then so I get rich, and then richer and richer little by little after the reform and opening up in the 1980s. And then, okay, so probably we are on an equal footing, and then we can negotiate. And then, so the thing is, in Chinese, there is this very ancient Chinese wisdom that is, what do we call it? 仓廪实而知礼节. And basically, it means if you get rich and then you talk about cultures and everything. So you get rich and then you get wealthy, and then you can talk about stuff with other people. Otherwise, you are in a weak position and there is no point arguing with anyone, or you are in no position to negotiate for any benefits in your own favor. So I think that's what the Chinese government has experienced over the past decades. And what China is doing right now is trying to lead some other developing countries and then tell them that you can do this, you need to get rich first. And you want to get rich, and then you probably should build up your infrastructure. Otherwise, there is no way for your commodities to be exported to other countries. And then and then your people would live in poverty, like endless poverty. You need to do something. I will give you concession loans. And of course, China is, and we know there is no free lunch. And what China has got from this, the deals through the Belt and Road Initiative, that would be that China is doing business, it is exporting something to other countries, and also it is importing some commodities from Belt and Road participants. And then, so what China is doing right now, I wouldn't agree that China is challenging the US hegemony. Now we are living in an international order that is dominated by US-led liberal hegemony. And I would say that China is a beneficiary of this international order at this point. What China is doing right now is leading some other developing countries, especially the underdeveloped countries, to fight for more voices. More voices should be heard. I mean, China is not making, China is not the decision, it's not making decisions, not any decisions, but I mean, when it comes to the rules of the international games, and the Chinese President Xi Jinping once said that we don't want to be led by others, and we also want to make rules ourselves. And I think what China is doing is trying to encourage some more developing countries to take the lead. Let's say BRICS. Let's say BRICS, and then so it is absolutely it is comprised of developing countries: Brazil, Russia, China, India, and South Africa. And then so we want to make a difference. And then so is China ready to overthrow the US hegemony right now at this point? I don't think so. And that is not what China is doing right now.
No, absolutely agree. I think China is the voice of the global South. And I think by what China is doing, maybe we can finally have a decolonization of the world, because well, you see, it's maybe it's not the world which is occupied like in the old days. You had the British Empire occupying India, but it's a different way of occupation. It's through international organization, IMF, the enslaving through the IMF, and and that is really the debt trap. not the Chinese that, Chinese that trap, it doesn't exist. It's, it's just the Western propaganda, but the IMF is a debt trap. So I think China is a very great voice when it comes to the global south, and it's a hope for decolonization. I'd like to add up, I think it's important to mention that when you look at history, China and India, they used to be 60% of world's GDP for 2000 years. So what is happening now is it's not about the emergence of China, it's just China taking back its original position, just because it's a huge country, it's an anomaly. Having 4% of the population, which is the US, ruling over the rest of the world, it's just an anomaly. And I think it's just an anomaly in world history. It just happened that China kind of missed, it had lots of internal problems because of civil war, and the 100 years of humiliation, because it missed also missed the industrial revolution. But it's just an anomaly. And I think it's really important to learn about history. China has never been hegemonic. Culturally, China is not hegemonic. And I would take the example of Jianhua, the Admiral Jianhua. Jianhua had a fleet. It was way more, the Chinese fleets under Jianhua was much, much more powerful than any other fleet, all the Western fleets combined together. So China could have taken over the whole world back then, and it didn't. And in many other cases, Genghis Khan, and Kublai Khan, they didn't spread towards Europe because Europe, there's nothing to pillage. Europe was just too backward, So I think there are just a few cases where China had some skirmishes. Maybe we can challenge maybe the clashes between Vietnam and China, but that's only one exception. But otherwise, China, when we look at the last 2000 years of history, it was more pragmatic. China was focusing on bringing prosperity to its people, and it hasn't changed. It hasn't changed. It's like it doesn't want to export it. It doesn't want to export the ideology. If you want to learn from China, well, you can learn. But we are not doing the mistake that maybe the USSR did back in the old days. They wanted to export communism, and they don't want to do what the West is doing, trying to export the Western liberal fake democracy, which I think it's just ridiculous to call them democracy. It's a system that is only for the 1% by the 1%.
Yeah, that is very interesting point. You said that China was never hegemonic in the past, in its history, and that is what we call it strategic cultural analysis. Because if you look at the history of China, but so it doesn't guarantee that there was no violence involved. I mean, in the past of China's culture. I mean, in the warring states. Thousands of years ago, of course, there were so much conflicts and riots and everywhere in China, but it is internal. It was limited to the different parts of China as a whole. We call it the Middle Kingdom. And China's strategic cultural strategy, we call it the cultural strategy of China, based on its history, is defensive. China's strategy is usually quite defensive. Even now, we meet some of the IR, international relations scholars, may call it active defensive, but it is only because China is trying to defend its own interests. I mean, within its own sphere, periphery, or we call it a sphere of influence. So if we look at China's material capabilities, including its economy, including its military, and also its scientific development and technological development, and the material capabilities, China actually have been developing really fast. And then, so usually from the realist point of view, if you have accumulated enough material capabilities like China has been doing, then China could have become a hegemon already, but China is not is because in its cultural strategy is quite defensive. I mean, China's economy has become the second largest economy starting 2010, surpassing Japan. And according to a report from the World Bank, I mean, if we take into consideration of PPP, purchase power parity, and then so China's GDP actually has already surpassed the US. I mean, around 3 years ago, of course. But the thing is, if we take into the large population of China, and China's per capita GDP is much lower than the United States, still we can't underestimate China's economic potential in the future. And also, when it comes to its military, China is the second largest spender in its military, and it's developing really fast. But China has been contributing to the EU peacekeeping mission. And also, we look at the overseas military bases, China only has one. The United States has hundreds of them. I mean, all around the world. That is, I mean, China is not developing. Okay, so I have the money, and then I have the power, I have the technology and the science. I have accumulated so much material capabilities, material power. Then why don't I expand my military all around the world? Why don't I set up military bases overseas just to compete with the United States? It's not doing so because it is not in its own favor, or it is not in the interest of the world at all. And also, when it comes to ideas, and then I was like, I mean, many people actually are quite interested in the community of a shared future for mankind. And what's your take on that? And then do you think it is any different from the traditional ideology or the universal ideology that the United States has been promoting all around the world?
I think United States and the West has a better marketing, especially when you look at words, how they appropriate themselves words. You know, when it comes to freedom, democracy, human rights, I mean, define them. You know, I mean, define freedom. I think and there are lots of things, examples where they are preaching something that do not apply at home, and actually, when it comes to human rights, it's far worse. I mean, how many lives destroyed? They went against, there was a fight against terrorism, and this fight of terrorism led to 1 million people dying in Iraq. So I'm asking, where are the human rights? COVID-19 is a good example. So far, 600,000 people died in the US. Where are their human rights? When you have so many homeless in the US, and you spend $1 trillion for US hegemony, while only $4 billion would just eradicate homelessness in the US. I'm asking, where are their human rights? You know, when you have Guantanamo people, you know, prisoners that are there, and you have legalized torture, I'm asking, where are their human rights? So you have all those. It's just marketing. They have access to US and the West. They have the monopoly of the Western media. And there's a lot of censorship, but it's just more subtle. So what happens is that, you know, you do it through Hollywood, you do it through social media, and whenever there is a debate, if you have the other idea is just being either shut down or censored, and it can be very subtle. It's just how they change the algorithm. They just make sure that this type of video that we are actually recording right now, they will make sure that the algorithm is negative and it gets limited attention. And if your message is too sensitive, they just shut you down. You know, there's I don't know if you're familiar with Timothy Cashnell. You know, he's a scholar based in Shenzhen. He just got his Twitter account being shut down. So, you know, this is just what they do. And my personal Twitter account is what we call shadow banned, meaning that it limits the exposure. So that's the problem. And I think China, where it's extremely weak, is the soft power when it comes to giving its side of the story, and it's weak not because of the way it's done, just because the obstacles that the US is putting, and also the budget. US AGM, it's the propaganda arm of the US, and underneath, they're funding Radio Free Asia. It's very big, but the budget they have is $1 billion per year. I mean, how can you fight that? How can you fight that? So it's very difficult, and I think what China is doing well is just by facts. If you have people that the listeners, people that listen to geopolitics, well, if they are focusing on fact, they will see that, well, China is delivering. China is it's a peaceful emerging power. And again, it's not, you have 130 million people, Chinese, that travel abroad every year, and every year they all go back. Why? Because China is bringing prosperity. China is delivering. You have even studies like Howard University did a study about satisfaction in China. You have 95% of Chinese that are satisfied with their government. So while in the West, you have maybe only 30% in the US which are satisfied about their current system. So that is the legitimacy, that shows the legitimacy. It's just the narrative is being hijacked, and it's very hard for us to expose, to deliver the other side of the story.
I think when it comes to media, because I work in media, and that I do feel that their soft power is better promoted, and as you call it, so there's better marketing, or it's because they have started a lot earlier than China did. I mean, when it comes to the BBC and the CNN is a latecomer, but CNN is doing a lot better right now. And also, I think when it comes to soft power, China is a latecomer, absolutely, because you need to develop your economy first, and then you move on to your soft power. Soft power, it was. I mean, the concept or the idea was coined by Joseph Nye. And then, so when it comes to soft power, it is very important. It's even more important than hard power. When it comes to hard power, it's about your economy, and it's about your military, your science and technology. But soft power, you need to make it attractive. I think America is very successful, we have to admit, when it comes to promoting a soft power through Hollywood. But Hollywood is very much like fast food. You love it at first, and then you have more of it, and then you realize, oh, I don't like it now. So I think that is the situation for many of the Hollywood blockbusters in the Chinese movie market. At this point, they loved it at the beginning when they were first introduced to China, and now they have somehow lost the luster that they had before. And then, so China is trying to promote its soft power. I think the central government has already realized the importance, the significance of it. And then, so what they are trying to do is trying to tell the China story probably from a different perspective. Like you see the difference, like the slogan of CGTN. And then, so there were so many different narratives, especially we are so used to the Western narratives over the past like decades or even hundreds of years already. I mean, when it comes to the BBC, I have some friends in Africa. I went to 6 African countries in 41 days back in 2018 to do this documentary about China and Africa's cooperation and development. And then I realized everywhere you go, you can watch CNN and also the BBC. So they are more used to this way of narrating stories. And also CGTN started to join the game, I think starting 2012, at least in Africa. And then, so I think that is trying to give them a different perspective. And many people realize, okay, so I used to think this way, probably it was not 100% accurate, and there is a different narrative. So, and then I need to pick which one is right. So that is what China is doing right now. And also when it comes to Chinese stories, I have realized whenever that is anything that's related to China is usually told from a very BBC or CNN perspective. I mean, it's usually negative. I mean, when it comes to China's, I mean, they don't usually cover or report China's economic achievement. They don't say, okay, China's economy has been growing fast. Usually the end of the story would be, or the agenda would be like, China's economic development wouldn't be sustainable, or it is sacrificing the environment, or it is sacrificing people's interest or anything, or they would usually pick something that is negative about China. I think that is the hidden agenda in their media. And what China is trying to do right now is trying to fight this negative narrative or the stereotype.
Yes, I have my experience in I mean, reading and watching Chinese news. First of all, it's you know, there's a relatively free press in China. Really, because I've experienced myself. But then I found a huge difference is that in China, unlike in the West, they give you the information, and it's up to you to decide about the you know, if it's good or bad. They don't lead you towards a certain direction. They say, well, there's a bomb blast, and they report the news. What in the West, they tell you exactly, which one are the good and the bad. They're actually leading you already just by calling them, you know, there's a difference when you call them terrorists, when you call them insurgents, and you see how they use the word. In China, it would be factual. And so you get the news, and it's up to you what you make of it. It's not leading you ideologically necessarily. And this is what I like from China, is that, you know, they're giving room for you to make up your mind. And I follow some amazing channels, you know, like you know, there's a Fohuang Dieshai, Jiang Weiwei, I think it's once per week. There are debates, amazing debates, and the level of political debates you have in China is just amazing. You see, the main problem is that, you know, this saying in Chinese, we say, 知己知彼, know thyself and know your enemy. Well, China does it well. China knows so much about the West and so much about its own system. When you look at the West, most Westerners, they actually have a hard problem understanding their own system. And the whole manipulation behind their own system. And there's a complete ignorance about China. And this is what is happening.
So Angelo, do you know why China knows so much about the West?
Oh,
yeah, because so this is the thing. What Chinese believe is like, if you are superior, if you're better, then we should learn from you. And then, so because China experienced recent poverty, and then its economy was absolutely wrecked by the civil war and foreign invasion. So it started to pick up, it started to stand on its feet. Then its economy was really poor. So it started to look at the West as like trying to find out how they develop their economy and what their strengths are and what their weaknesses are. So this is what China has been doing. And usually for like the developed countries, mostly centers in the global north, or we call it the West, also is because mostly the Westerners have already reached the level of, you know, well-being and also the riches they have accumulated. So they don't tend to look at people, I mean, who are falling behind. So this is the thing. This is why China knows more about the West than the other way around. So yeah, that's the thing.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting. I like to take the example of late Deng Xiaoping. I think his vision and the way he approached that was just amazing. He didn't fall into the trap that the USSR did. The USSR, they went into liberal economy. They tried to copy the West too much, and they didn't take into account the local characteristic and challenges. So Yeltsin is sold off completely the USSR. It was a huge I mean, this is something that China didn't want to do. So under Deng Xiaoping, you had this Geiger Kaifang, this opening up of China, and it was a step by step. And what he did, he was looking at different countries around the world. And I think he was very much inspired by the Lee Kuan Yew, the system in Singapore. Singapore was just an amazing system. And it really, what Lee Kuan Yew did to Singapore is just amazing. And I think it was about looking around the world, every single system, and trying to find the Chinese system that would be under Chinese characteristic. And so it was, you know, this is saying in Chinese, saying, 莫之是斗过河. When you crossing the river, you touch the stones, right?
Yeah.
And he applied the Western system, market economy into special economic zones, and especially one of the good examples was Shenzhen. And he was extremely smart, and I think it's a critical time. What the West wanted for China was for China to become exactly like the West, and but China was much more. The Chinese government was much smarter. It was pretending it would enter into the system because China was desperate to get funding and investment. So maybe it made believe, or maybe just the West believed that China would just become, you know, they would find a way to subvert China. You know,
so this is the thing. So as you said, it is like the Chinese government is opening up its market step by step, and actually it is still doing so. And Angelo, if you go to Hainan, like the southernmost province, the island province, it has become a free trade port, or I would like to call it actually a free trade island. The whole island would be a free trade area, a free trade province, and there will be some new policies rolled out by the central government to open up its markets. And there were so many pilot free trade zones in China. There were altogether 18 of them in different parts of China to open up this market. And I think what the Chinese government is doing is they are doing it quite cautiously, step by step. They don't open up this market completely. That could be very dangerous. I mean, that would be a huge competition. I mean, China's domestic industries will be facing or be confronted with very fierce competition from all around the world. China has this huge market. We have a population of 1.4 billion. I mean, that is huge. That is a huge market. Of course, everyone wants to get the pie. Everyone, especially the United States, it wants a finger in every pie, as we call it. So in China, absolutely, if we open up the markets completely, if we follow the market economy, absolutely, that could be a little bit dangerous. But what China has been doing actually now, it is already the market economy. I mean, in China, internally, and the government is taking the lead, of course. The government has to, I mean, shoulder its responsibility if there is anything going wrong when it comes to the market economy, and the government can intervene and to navigate through the treacherous waters. Okay, and also, or the West would like to call it the state. They would like to call it state capitalism, and I think that is very much like the Chinese government is controlling China's economy, and it is funding like different sectors to compete with the Western market on the international arena. I mean, that is, I don't think that is responsible to say that China is, I mean, state capitalism is what China is doing right now. If we look at the small and medium enterprises, and then China is trying to encourage and motivate the growth of the small and medium ones. I mean, if all of the companies are state-owned, that would be dangerous. I think that is China probably like 20 or 30 years ago. I mean, if they want to talk about state capitalism, they should come to China now. And there were so many small and medium companies, and then so people get employed and they're employing about 70% of the Chinese population. I mean, they must be kidding me if China is totally controlled. I mean, all the companies are state-owned. That would be I mean, Chinese people actually would love to see that if everything is, I mean, state-owned, and then you get the job for your lifetime. I mean, that is not happening now. That is like 20 or 30 years ago. And I do understand this, their misunderstanding, because right after my graduation, so, and then some of my relatives have asked me, okay, you get a job and the government will assign you a job. I mean, how come they will assign you a job? How? Why do they do that? And then you get a job, you go find a job yourself. And then, so this is the thing, this is the a stereotype. I mean, in the past, probably 20 or 30 years ago, everything was state-owned, not everything, but a great majority of the companies. Once you graduate from college and then you get assigned a job. And then if you come to China now, no way.
No.
I mean, the Chinese graduates would love to see that, of course, but it is not happening anymore.
Yeah, I'd like to add something. I think it's very important. There's this misunderstanding from people, especially the leftists abroad. Well, they start to criticize China as becoming capitalist and so on. I think it's very important to understand that it's a market-oriented economy. Okay, that's right. But it's very important to understand that it's still a government by the people for the people. That especially when you look at the differences with the West is that it's a meritocracy system. So people that are actually ruling and managing the country are there because, first of all, they were selected. So you have a selection system, and then they go up the ladder of power through a system of meritocracy. So you get only the best people that are ruling the Communist Party. And again, and also something which is really important is that the rich people in China have no say into politics. That is extremely important. It's not like in the West where you have the money is ruling the politics. Well, this is China, it will never happen. So when you look at the politics, the Congress in China, it's extremely representative of the population. Mm-hmm. It's not the government by the 1% for the 1%. It's really, you have people like, representative, in terms of women, minorities, the fields they're in, engineers, lawyers, and so on. I think one of the differences when it comes to politics between Western politicians and Chinese politicians is that Chinese, the background, they tend to be more like engineers, while in the West you have lawyers and people from finance. And there's this system of bribery you have in the West, lobbying and bribery. If it was in China, it would be called corruption, and people go to jail for corruption.
Yeah, so that is what they call lobbyists, right?
Exactly. I think they call lobbyist, and a lobbyist sounds a nice word, but in reality, that's corruption. And people for corruption in China, they go to jail,
that is a very interesting point you have raised. I mean, lobbyist, and then so it is very much like corruption. Yeah, I never thought about that.
Well, Jianhua, there's actually, it can be more subtle. What happens is that there's a system of what we call revolving door in the West. So people are going from being politicians to joining corporation. So the revolving door is just deferred corruption. So when you are into politics, you help your friends in corporates. And then when you get to corporate, you get lavish salaries. So this is why you have politicians. I will give you a range of politicians that have a wealth of more than 50 million in the US. Nancy Pelosi, Biden, Obama, Romney, they all have more than $50 million of wealth. You can check that. You can Google. So this is why I think it's about it's about democracy. It's about the satisfaction. The satisfaction of people gives you the legitimacy, and it's about how representative are the people, how is it representative? So when you have in the Congress and in the Senate in the US, where you have multimillionaires that are representing you, doesn't make any sense. They are going to work for themselves, but not for you. So this is why, you know, it goes back to 知己知彼. You know, Westerners, before judging China, they should look at their own system. You know, the US, before liberating their world, they need to liberate their own country, because the biggest oppressors of Americans are their own government. You see, I'm not, but again, you know, I stick to the ideas that people should have, every country should have self-determination, and we should not interfere in other countries' affairs, just because every people, every nation has a different lens on its own history. So there's only an Afghani that will know what is good for Afghanistan. Who am I as a Westerner to go to Afghanistan and say, well, you know what, you should not be like this? Who am I? So, you know, it's about self-determination. And by going this way, China is doing right. It doesn't interfere into other countries' affairs, and it sticks to that. And by doing that, every country, if it follows like this, there would be a collapse of the US empire, and countries will recover their self-determination, and we will have finally maybe a more democratic world. It's going to be about trading, and it's going to be about prosperity. Because what is missing in the world is that we're missing that point, which is bring back basic human rights. You know, education, health, prosperity. That is what people are looking for. And again, you know, it's very interesting when you look at, when you think about average people, what people think about when they wake up in the morning. They don't think about identity politics. They don't think about anything else than how can I raise my kids? Money, how can I put food on the table? And China is very down to earth when it comes to this. You know what? You can talk about everything when it comes to human freedom, democracy, and so on. At the end of the day, it's bring food on the table. And you know, even revolutions, you know, when you analyze the revolution, the French Revolution, people never fought for democracy. They were fighting back then in 1789. They were fighting for getting more bread. But now you watch movies about the French Revolution and they say, oh, we want democracy. It was never true. People, most of, you know, social unrest you have around the world, including now in Cuba, it's about food. We want more food on the table, you know, and that's the main worry that people have around the world.
The people should have the basics at least until they move on to something else a little bit celestial. If you look at the Maslow's pyramid, and would be your physical existence, of course, you need to have enough food at all. I don't think that people, especially soldiers or mercenaries, they would be worrying about other people's democracy and something like that, or human rights, and then you should get food, like the basic. I think America follows the idea of exceptionalism, the thing that the United States is exceptional, and that it was chosen by God, and then they should spread the democracy to other parts of the world. But probably those are, I mean, the ideology in the first place and the ideas are, I mean, self-made, fabricated by the United States to justify its actions in Syria, in the Middle East, to get some oil resources from those countries to fuel, I mean, its people, to fuel its cars, its everything. So, I mean, liberalism, America is following liberalism, or generally, I mean, the world, we need to face it right now. We need to admit that the world is still dominated by a liberal, it is liberal hegemony. But the thing is, when it comes to liberalism, and then the bottom of it, the essence of it is I think it is from Kant. So you believe in the good of people, not the evil of people. And then you think that people are good, I mean, in nature, and then we tend to cooperate with others. And also neoliberalism, and then it's about the economy. I think that is from Smith and also Ricardo. They think that business should go around without any control from the government. So that is the liberal hegemony right now. But But the thing is, they need to realize now, people, in nature, they probably are not that kind as they thought in the first place. They work on cooperation and everything. So they think that the United States is spreading this idea of liberalism and also democracy, and people should be entitled to democracy everywhere around the world. But democracy, I would say that's the least worst way of governance. We don't say that is bad because people are entitled to different kinds of freedoms of expression, of development, of physical existence, of everything. And then, but democracy can be dangerous. Let's say, some countries actually are very, very bad examples of democracy. Democracy is applicable to those countries whose people have developed, whose education has, is very developed. Let's say, let me give you one example. I think that is very illustrative. So if say there is this one country that is comprised of 10 people, and then 8 of them are stupid, only 2 of them are wise. So if I give you democracy and then you can elect whoever you want, what if they land on a stupid person to lead the country?
Yeah. But this is a problem of mob rule. I give you an example. In India, you have a majority of Hindu people, and then you have Muslims. Now they're showing laws, anti-Muslim laws. If you follow the democracy system, is the majority is ruling of the minority here, basically, and they're just fighting for their own interest of the 80%, not the interest of the 20%. So this is the mob rule. You need a certain level of maturity, and I think it's very important that you have to have an entity that actually can preserve the sovereignty and the cohesion of a country. And this is maybe what is happening. It's very counterintuitive, but this is what is happening in Thailand, for example. You have the king actually, which is there as the ultimate entity, which is protecting the cohesion of the whole country. In some other cases, it can be done under a solid constitution. When you have a solid constitution that is preserving the minorities against the mob rule, but that is in fact very dangerous, because people, they will fight for their own clans. Jianhua, we could talk for a long time, but let's leave it here. I think I'd love to have you on again, on an exchange, because we have a lot of topics, and I think it's important. Your voice should be heard. You are Chinese. You are a good bridge because you've studied abroad. You have so you have this understanding of the two sides, and you can bridge the two cultures. So I would love to have you again on a more discussions.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Jianhua. I'll talk to you soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.